Now, I want to speak federal politics now and bring in Paul Fletcher, the Manager of Opposition Business for the Coalition in Federal Parliament. Thanks for joining us, Paul, but I'm certain first up you'd like to share your thoughts on this tragedy that's unfolded in Queensland.
Well, Chris, it is an absolute tragedy. 2 young police officers serving the community. It's hard work and they put themselves in danger every day, and sadly we've seen very clear evidence of just how dangerous being a police officer can be. A neighbour, a respected citizen, also tragically killed. I think the entire nation is united in its horror at what has happened, and in our deep sympathies for all the friends and family and loved ones of 3 people who are now no longer with us.
Indeed. On a day like today, it's always hard to get on to normal business, but we do pay our respects to those issues and move on with other business because you've got federal parliament returning on Thursday to deal with this price capping issue for coal and gas. You're the Manager of Opposition Business. You'd have an idea of how much this is costing to get everyone back into Canberra for just one day and one issue. Is it worth it?
Well, Chris, it's been a completely chaotic process. So Labor has, for 6 months, been working to develop, it would seem, a policy to live up to the promises they made before the election that they were going to deliver a reduction in power prices. Just last Friday, the Prime Minister said, we've got a plan and the Parliament's got to come back next Thursday. This is completely chaotic. The Parliament rose nearly 2 weeks ago. It's going to cost easily $1 million. If you look at 226 parliamentarians, you look at airfares, you look at travel allowance, you look at Comcars, you look at staff, you look at security, there'll be casual shifts being worked by security guards, you look at parliamentary attendance, you look at the people who work in catering in Parliament House. This is completely unnecessary. So first of all, it's very wasteful of taxpayers' money, but secondly, it's a very, very bad process because what the Labor government is essentially saying, what Mr Albanese is essentially saying is, Parliament, come back one day, rubber stamp, no question time, no time to consider the merits and the details.
Exactly, no analysis. But we did a whole lot of virtual Parliament during COVID. Couldn't they just do that, have everyone log on?
Well, the Prime Minister has not satisfactorily explained why this measure needs to be dealt with this Thursday. Now, look, we've been clear that targeted and temporary measures to offer rebates on bills make sense. Now, on the timing that has been announced by the government, they're talking about...
They're not going to pay anything till after March.
It's not going to be finalised till March next year.
So there's no need to do that.
So why does this particular element, the cap on gas, need to be rushed through? And what cannot be disputed is that this is an issue that affects the interests of many people, of gas companies, of consumers, of investors. There ought to be a proper process. You know, the typical way this is done in Parliament is a bill gets introduced, there's some time for it to be considered, there's a committee, a Senate committee or a joint committee to investigate it, to hear from the people who are affected. The government saying, Mr Albanese is saying, none of that should happen. This should be rammed through in one day. Now, this is the same Mr Albanese who was for years Manager of the Opposition Business, or indeed Mr Burke, who was also Manager of Opposition Business. They told us regularly that Parliament is about accountability, scrutiny, holding executive government to account. That's all right. They're now completely trashing and ignoring these principles. This is a very bad way to go.
Now they want to just do the slam dunk. But even worse, right, because this bill apparently is going to deal with both aspects in one bill. That is, put a cap on gas prices, which is the controversial bit. The other bit is handing out some cash rebates for people who need it. Now, they shouldn't need it. It shouldn't have been stuffed up this badly, but because prices are so high, surely as a coalition you would want to support some cash rebates to pensioners and low-income holders to get them through high energy prices. Shouldn't these issues be dealt with separately?
I think that is a very sensible point. We make the point that the underlying issue here is a lack of supply of gas. There has been a lack of policy focus by the Labor government on how to increase the supply of gas coming into the market. Indeed, they've taken a number of budgetary measures that go in the opposite direction. And now, for what appears to be purely political purposes, they're wanting to combine these 2 measures. Now, we've said we don't have an objection to targeted and temporary measures to provide rebates, but there's no reason that needs to be done at the same time. And if the timing that the Prime Minister has announced is that the rebates won't be settled until March, when National Cabinet again meets, he needs to explain, Labor needs to explain, is the urgency here genuine or is it a political stunt? And can they explain why there is such dreadful process that complex provisions affecting the interests of many businesses and investors as well as consumers are proposed to be rammed through both houses of Parliament in one day. This is a terrible process.
Now, on this same issue, I want to show you a classic example of political chutzpah. Here's the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, just yesterday.
Now, anybody who votes against this in the Parliament is voting for higher prices for Australian industry and for Australian families. Now, the Coalition has already indicated they'll be voting for higher energy prices.
He's got a nerve, hasn't he? This is a bloke saying to vote against his bill is to vote against lower prices. He got elected promising prices would be $275 lower, and they're now gone up by more than that.
97 times. The Labor Party promised a $275 reduction in the power price of Australian families. We've asked about this repeatedly in the Parliament over the past few months. Mr Albanese has refused to endorse that figure. Mr Chalmers has refused to endorse that figure. Mr Bowen has refused to endorse that figure. On the contrary, Mr Chalmers brought down a budget that said, forget what we told you before the election. Actually, electricity prices are going to go up 56%, gas prices are going to go up 44%. And now this extraordinary claim that this chaotic scramble from this government that if we don't accept every aspect of it, then in some way we're to blame. Look, they're the government. They're the ones who are responsible for dealing with this. We will engage constructively. We've made it clear, the notion of targeted temporary responsible rebates.
Yeah, and
we've been clear on that.
Supply.
So this is a mess.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us. Have a happy Christmas and New Year. Paul Fletcher there, the manager of Opposition Business.